Hi, everyone. Welcome to another session of the Product Mind podcast. Thanks for joining us again. We hope you enjoyed the last one. And today we have Ted back from all over the planet, it seems like.
Right. I'm
So
much
before we
much
get
older
started,
now.
before we get started, maybe Ted can tell us a little bit about what he's been traveling for briefly, and then we can get into some of the things
Yeah,
that
so
are,
I
yeah.
was down in South America and I was doing a keynote at South Summit, Brazil, which is, by the way, if you've not been there, an amazing place with a lot of entrepreneurial energy and actually a pretty strong ecosystem, especially in the fintech space. And while I was there, I was doing other meetings and doing some kind of small group sessions and what have you. And it was all really good. And then last week I was away because it was my 50th birthday. So yay me. I'm now 50, which is somewhat strange, but hey, look, I think I look pretty much the
You look
same.
like
So
you look 18 actually. You look
yeah,
like
thanks, man. I
a
appreciate
little
that.
an Asian kid who just left MIT.
Yeah, look,
Stereotype.
better that than the alternative. So I'm all set. I'm all
Okay. Okay, well, happy 50th, and hope you didn't bring back any bugs from South America. That was a
I
joke.
hope
That
not
was a
either.
joke.
Yeah.
And so today we want to just do a pretty short session, and we want to talk about a range of things happening in AI. Before we get into that, eh, the thing about Product Mind is that we spend so much time talking to product leaders, founders, people who are sort of the grassroots of AI. Like everyone knows that this year has been frenetic. Like agents got introduced, OpenClaw. Um, we have all the way up to Mythos now, right, which is gated behind private companies and the government. And what we try to do here is to tell you the implications of things. So here's the first take. We are seeing, the SaaS world and actually the desktop world was the world of Microsoft Office, the world of Microsoft Office in the cloud and iOS and operating systems, major cloud applications guiding productivity, right? That's what we are. What we're seeing instead is that, and you can see this in many companies who are forcing this on their employees. We're seeing people become orchestrators, right? There's a major article we're going to publish about the death of white collar work. And we're seeing the most frontier companies, not frontier labs or anything, just the best companies, forcing their employees to not click on email, but to use agents to process email, right? And they're forcing it. Um, So what does that mean though to desktop productivity or the core productivity suite? So let me pose it as a question. Will we see the decline of the productivity interface, email, Word, Excel, and they will fade into the background. And all you're doing is using something like a harness, Claude Desktop, Claude Cowork to really process the data. They become the front end, but everything else, even the things that have UI, become the back end. And what are the first and second order implications of this? So
I'm
I'm
not
asking you guys
sure if
because
that's
you are so
happening, man.
smart. You're gonna tell me in a second.
I'm not sure if that's really going to happen, man. I mean, honestly, we've been working with this kind of Windows-based interface. I don't care if it's Mac or Windows or whatever, but this concept of a graphical user interface for, I don't know, 40 years. And,
Uh-huh.
prior to that, we had what, like green screens? And even when we now have mobile and tablets, it's still basically the Windows interface, right? It's not that different. It's still, and you're positing that now with agents, it's all going to just change. I don't know, man. I'm
Well, maybe
skeptical.
not change, but remember these things ruled our world. You logged onto your I remember when I was battling Google at Microsoft, people spent like 20, 30 minutes Googling stuff because they had other stuff to do, right? And we were Windows, people spent 8 hours in Windows. We were Office, people spent 4 to 6 hours in Windows every day. We commanded, think about it, we commanded your attention for work in those applications. And not only are we seeing the people walking away from search, like people starting to type their first search into AI windows to retrieve information, we are also seeing people going to co-work to author documents, and that co-work talks to Google Docs, puts it back in there, fetches it from there. We're seeing people write agents that process their email, do all the work in their email, and all they get is a digest. So, in terms of number of what you see in a day, where you spend your time, are we seeing a
Mm,
replacement?
I think
mm,
in your question, I think you have a point of view that you're not necessarily
I mean,
surfacing,
it's a
but
mm.
question. It's a
but
question
sure,
I'm seeing. What there's a difference between me and you
yeah.
and Joe Schmo in
So
middle of the street, Illinois,
so
and his ability to do work. You know what I mean? So that's my
so
way.
you and I have had this conversation quite a bit because I talked about a long time ago. I talked about what do applications become, and even the
Mhm,
mental models that we're trying to automate. I mean, the applications we use are not
mhm,
just interfaces; they actually also feed into mental models of what is mail to us, right? What are slide decks to us? So the simple question of where will we spend our time? I think we will spend our time in these new interfaces. ChatGPT, we are doing that already, right? But the
mhm,
reality is that there, when you communicate and work with others, there has to be some shared way of reviewing, etc. And there's some mental models that have remained for us. Visual presentation. The other is, reading. So those will exist. Even email exchange, whatever it was, there was still something that existed to allow for exchange between two human brains of what's going on. So as applications for what they do and their very specific vertical need, those will exist. And they will also persist, in my opinion, for reference, for control, to better serve you in the way you want that particular application to do. And in some cases where you do not have agents to do XYZ, you will still need to go back to the application to set it, to update it, whatever it is. But
Sure.
how you go in and do that work, I think will change. Like the same way when Slack came about, as many things as you wanted to do, you were able to connect it to Slack and do from there. But those applications still persisted. And whenever you needed to actually do deep work in that particular vertical or workflow, you would then go in there. So that's how I'm thinking about it. And as always, we at the front end of this stuff. So we may be seeing all this stuff, but that's just a percentage of the world. And if we're going to continue to do business with the rest of the world, I think those things will persist a little longer than one may think.
Right. I'm with you on that. And I think that the interfaces that we see, and we've talked about this in blog posts, right, are becoming less important because the chat-based interface is taking over, right?
Hmm.
Nowadays, if I can't find a feature on my phone on how to change something, I don't go digging through menus. I just ask it, right?
Hmm.
It's as simple as that. No one has the time to go do this because it's going to move somewhere else. Now, what is that going to mean? It means ultimately the GUI designers are not going to put that much attention to where they put the feature because they don't care anymore. So they don't care. We
Hmm.
don't care. We're going to use the chat interface to figure out how to toggle some setting, right? And you're going
But
to see more.
but the vertical need for that content around the setup still exists. Somebody is going to still have to create that content that lives somewhere for it to be referenced so that it can be, served. So even though they may not call it uh setup, what are those pieces of paper that you put into setup manuals, right? They may not exist as we know it, but that construct still remains. Somebody is
Yeah.
shipping this, and as a result must make available the information for setup for this thing somewhere.
Yeah, and I like your concept of deep work, right? Because I think that a lot of work that people do in the office is shallow. And so a lot, especially email, it's like almost as shallow as it gets, right? And that kind of work, yeah, it will be taken over. But if it comes time to sit down and actually get your thoughts in order, you're going to have to go somewhere
A
else. I,
word
I don't
processor
see
of some
how that's,
sort.
yeah, yeah,
So
or
maybe
real
maybe
content creation.
maybe let's reframe this. Maybe more subtle, then we can go on to the next thing. Is so we already know that in co-work, if when it makes a document, you can view it in a pane. When it makes a PowerPoint, you can view it in a pane. In the era of infinite code, it would be trivial to manipulate it in the pane, right? And so really it's not disappearance. Nothing ever disappears, right, in the world of network effects. It's more like it's a question of scale and who takes over. And it has huge implications for the valuations of the company. So if I manipulate a document and then I can do the refinement within Claude Code, the number of times I will visit PowerPoint.exe
Right.
will reduce. And the ability for them to do it's actually fascinating. In one of the things that the government sued Microsoft for was these binaries. You know, we had OLE and we had doc format. And by pushing the doc format through a monopoly, we got sued at Microsoft because it was not interoperable, right? Word Perfect format had to die because docs was pushed on all PCs and so on and so forth. And guess what Microsoft did, which is turning out to be, I guess, good for everybody, but not necessarily good for their hegemony, is doc became an XML format. So through the time we built SOAP services, we transformed all those binary things into essentially markup.
Yeah.
And because LLMs can understand markup, this is why the first skills that came out for presentation on Claude was PowerPoint skill. Why? Because it understood CSS, understands XML markup in PowerPoint files. So they read these supposed binary files so natively they can replace them. They couldn't have done it if it was just doc. So
Yeah.
I suspect that as people go away from doing to orchestrating, these things will remain, but they will not rule our world because we'll be able to not only manipulate them very quickly through agents, but we'll be able to do the final refinement maybe in situ. This is what I expect.
Yeah.
Do you guys see do we, or maybe the way to think about it is like, does Microsoft do something that will counteract that? Like, is Copilot going to like be part of the Microsoft sales thing and it will stay in everybody's forefront?
Well, you're already seeing Copilot as a brand start to be subsumed back in, right? So at one
Uh-huh.
point it was Copilot, 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 and now it's going to
Uh-huh.
fall back in, and that's probably the natural political back and forth within Microsoft itself, right?
Uh,
More than anything else. But I don't think there is something you can do about this. I think that orchestration has a different workflow. It's as simple as that. When you're the boss and you've got a team, are you doing the deep work? You're not. You're coordinating the deep work. So how often are you pulling open Excel versus telling someone to change something in Excel, right?
mm.
So the more you see of that, the more you're going to see of people pulling away from hours within the application. Makes
Wow.
sense.
I think that a new experience is going to develop somehow.
Hmm. Hmm.
And it's
Say
that
more.
Microsoft is lucky, and this is an opportunity for them. I think they have a lot of the right tools, as well as Google, with the Google Suite. And that's where deep work happens. But, my kids always joke that, Mom, you're always making slides, right? But why am I always making slides, right? It's that at the level I'm trying to orchestrate, I'm trying to drive decisions, I'm trying to do something at that executive level. And even though I create slides, oftentimes I may link to a document that has the details, or I may link to a spreadsheet that has some more details, or even a dashboard, a data dashboard. So I do think that that there's this dance that has to occur, which is Excel with Copilot or Copilot with Excel. But I think that there's an opportunity to birth a more individualized or personalized experience that
Hmm.
sits atop of it and allows one to truly orchestrate at the level you want to work, right? From communications to a whole lot of things. I don't know if it's a
Mhm.
chat interface, but it's almost like your dashboard of, oh, I'm doing this work. And it may be Slack. It may actually look more like Teams or Slack, because the more I
Hmm.
think about it, tasks when you're at work, it usually is about the people. Who do I need to make this decision? And then you're exchanging data.
Mhm.
So there's a task to person interaction. So again, I'm not waking up thinking about this all the time. I think your question is new and I'm just thinking through it, but I believe there's an opportunity for something different here. Um, yeah, maybe next week I'll know more. I'll think about this a bit more, but
Okay, let's switch gears. So Ted brought up something interesting. So
So
You
I
have
want to
like a
talk
pet peeve.
about
Let's
the
talk
new
about it.
release of Opus 4.7, right? To great fanfare. And the great fanfare is, hey guys, we're giving you basically the same power of Opus 4.6. Thank us and pay us more money for this wonderful new upgrade. And yes, in other words, the enshittification of Claude. Now, this is what happens, I think, naturally, because now Claude is the big dog, right? When Claude wasn't the big dog, they had to play the other way. Now they're the big dog, everyone else is playing catch up, and now they're, kind of taking their users for granted. And I think this gets worse because all of the hype is around the model that you don't have access to, Mythos, right? So we've got this awesome thing. You can't get that. Forget that. So, by the way, we're going to give you this. It's not nearly as good, but give us more money. Thank you very much. Now, and I think none of that would be that bad if it wasn't the fact that, and this is Opus 4.6, but also prior models have been getting worse. Now, I think that we talked about this in different podcasts and different writings. And I think, there's obviously the physical aspect of data centers that causes this, right? So we get that. But the other part of it is frankly pure marketing, right? They are turning the dials to make 4.6 weaker so that you think 4.7 is awesomer. There's really no other explanation. So you read, some of the conspiracy theories on Reddit. You go on Discords and you listen, you read what people are doing. And again, these are not amateurs, right? These people are using this stuff to power OpenClaw and, well, when they could, and other real models. They're trying to do real work. And they're like, something sketchy going on here, right? And what we're seeing is Anthropic is acting like any other company. And they're saying, hey, this is how we make a new release. Bang, right? And this is the exact same thing that happened with ChatGPT with their new latest releases, right? And then at some point, the world catches up and goes, wait a minute, guys, this is a shell game. But I think we're starting to get to that moment a little bit faster with Claude, especially again, because the really good shit you don't have any access to at all.
I guess I sympathize with your position, but I feel a couple of things that people should just like understand. One is, until we have infinite compute, this is going to be the pattern, right? As they build new models, they're going to throttle the old one so that they can get to the new one. And I also think that the internet elite are the ones who complain the most. Most people aren't using it as
Absolutely.
assiduously. And frankly, like, if 1% of people churn, then 5% of people start a new trial.
Right.
And
And
so
they
I
don't
think
care.
that, yeah, I think like it's like they're selling crack and they know it. And so it makes it's like the loud people on Twitter don't matter at all to the economics. Like, these are the people who've caught up with OpenAI, blowing past it in terms of revenue. They're not slowing down anytime. So did you see that the Trump administration is looking for exclusive access to Mythos for government agencies
Yeah, I saw
after
that.
the Department of Defense repudiated
Crazy.
repudiated what, but they can't not use it. It's crack.
That is just so insane. It just and again, does anyone actually know anyone who's used Mythos? Like, we know people. Like, so I don't, right? I've not spoken to anyone who's like, I've actually been hands-on keyboard with this. Okay. So maybe it doesn't even exist.
No. So no.
No, okay.
Wow, dude. Yeah, this
We
is
don't know how awesome it
moon,
is.
moon landing stuff. Well, here's the thing, right? Here's what I noticed. I've been paying attention to see the effect of Mythos. Like, what have they found? And because I'm in the IoT world, one of the things I saw was that it found a vulnerability in an SSL library that is only used. Most OpenSSL usually runs hosts,
Mhm.
but most tiny devices use Wolf SSL. They found an almost unfixable, because these IoT devices have no repair cycle. So there are billions of devices, 5 billion devices, that are compromised with a weak cipher inside Wolf SSL that they were only found with Mythos.
You guys seem so
So sorry.
thorough.
I feel like very dramatic, but
I
I'm
know.
point is, it exists, right? Because
It
we're
does.
seeing its effects.
Sure.
We don't have access to it, but every CVE you're gonna see over the next 1 month is gonna be Mythos found. Well, maybe half of them.
It the signal I have that concerns me is the fact that Anthropic decided that it was going to try and allow for authentication with the whole governmental ID. You guys heard that, all of that. So
Uh-huh.
it's signaling to
Well, can
me
you explain it
something.
to our readers, because this is important?
So one of the recent releases, Anthropic decided that there are some executions, like if you're going to make a few requests, it was going to require that you use a government ID, right, to
And your
authenticate to your
face.
account. Sorry?
And your face.
And your face to authenticate requests,
Mhm.
etc. So just like is it X? You can be verified, right? Or if you can, TSA pre, right? That type of thing. They will let
That's
you
it.
do all sorts of things if you tell us who you are. That doesn't bode like, think about what that means. It means that
Actually, I think I'm more benign. You know that you can't join Google's API program without
I
doing that
I
anymore.
get that, but like when you think about
Yeah.
the Mythos existing and you think of that being their next step,
Mm-hmm.
connect the dots, man. Like
No, yeah, they don't want
Don't
you
forget
access to
Alvin is the
ordnance.
man that
No,
brought you
no
the eye
nuclear
scanner,
access
man.
they
without
are
identification.
proving, they're dropping that barrier, right? They're making it such that we will know who you are if we need to know who you are because of the
Yes,
Yep.
power you will begin to wield. That's all I got.
Yep.
that's right.
Yep.
Yes, yeah. No,
100%.
it fits. Mythos exists, Ted. Seriously.
Listen, I believe it. Hey, listen, here's an interesting tie back to using your face, right? So when I was in Brazil, right, and people, Sao Paulo is kind of infamous for crime. I actually didn't believe that. So kudos to people who, Brazilians out there who told me like this is overblown, because I think it was overblown. Anyway, you use your face as ID everywhere, everywhere. You get into my Airbnb, to get into office buildings, to get into the gym. Okay, you use your face everywhere. Nobody cares. So this is, I think the ship has sailed on this stuff, right? I think the ship has sailed, and everyone knows who you are pretty much at all times. Now, of course, when you're using an API, it gets a little bit like what's going on here, because you're still some abstraction layers away from that. So we're still going to see some misuse of this, okay? But it's the future, right? This tie. Now the problem is who controls it, because I don't think, look, I'm not an anarchist, technical kind of guy, but I don't trust anyone really to do the right thing with they have the ability to authenticate me, right? So unfortunately, we have no control over it, because now it's the government and it's Google and it's Anthropic and it's everybody. They all have that same power now that you don't have, right?
Right. Okay, guys, I really have to drop. I have a hard stop. We'll can this and then we'll use it either standalone or with something else. Okay. Talk
Okay.
to you soon. Cheers.